Good morning from South America. We're back again with our expat sisterhood chats, and this time we are going to be talking about raising our kids in another culture, and not just raising them, but what are the advantages and disadvantages. So today we're just going to touch on the the advantages.
Flourishing.
Right. Because there are so many. Obviously there are some things that are disadvantages, but for me, especially having raised some of our kids since they were babies here, I feel like the advantages far outweigh the disadvantages, and we are so thankful that we've been able to raise our three boys in another culture and another country outside of their passport country. Which brings me to my point of sharing what is a third culture kid. You may already be familiar with this term. Basically, it's if you are raising your kids outside of their passport country. And the way David Pollock puts it is a third culture kid is a person who has spent a significant part of his or her developmental years outside of the parent's culture. The TCK frequently builds relationships to all of the cultures while not having full ownership in any. Although elements from each culture may be assimilated into the TCK's life experience, the sense of belonging is in relationship to others of similar background. So that is his definition of TCK. And I actually, with that definition, as I was born in Mexico and grew up in the US, I grew up as a TCK, not even realizing it.
There's a name for this?
Right. And now we are raising our kids here in South America. So we are going to touch on 4 different little tidbits about advantages, but each one entails so much. So hopefully we can get some good conversation out of this.
Yeah. The first thing that comes to mind for advantages, and this is just repeated again and again with anyone you talk to, I think, about this topic, is that growing up in a different culture totally changes your worldview, and for the better, to give you a richer, broader, more interesting worldview. I think even the fact that kids growing up between cultures are aware that there's such a thing as a worldview is, I think if you're growing up monoculture a little more, you don't even think about the fact that people would see things in a different way than you do. Doesn't everybody do things the way I do them? But it's not an option to have that perspective when you're living between cultures. Right from the start, you realize that people speak other languages than the language that I might speak in my home. You have an opportunity to learn that language, which is a nice perk as well.
And you don't even realize.
Yeah, and with languages, with different cultures, you start to see that, there are certain phrases that express an idea better in one language than the other language, or there are certain just ideas about life that one culture really emphasizes and the other one really doesn't. And it's beautiful to have the experience of seeing this. Your eyes are opened, and I think that it really can create a lot of empathy and understanding. The experience of being an outsider is something that's really valuable in developing your worldview. I was telling Madi, when I first lived outside of my home culture, when I was living in Mexico, after I finished high school, I remember having the experience of being in a room and realizing I am the only person from the US in this room. I'm the only one who speaks English, and just feeling really self-conscious and very aware of that fact, but at the same time thinking, I bet no one else in the room thinks twice about it. It's not a big deal. Being an outsider, I think that really gives a lot of opportunity to create empathy and compassion in our children's hearts. And we have a couple of quotes from different moms that we wanted to share about their perspective. about advantages, and the worldview theme pops up in almost all of these quotes. I'm going to read one of them from another mom in South America. She says, "Our kids have a much broader worldview. They can appreciate differences of race, culture, language, and socioeconomics. When they move back to our home country for college, they're not satisfied to fit into the mold." And another mom who's got her kids in China talks about, she asked her kids what they thought the advantages of growing up abroad were, and they said, "We get to try new foods, and we learned that Chinese food in America is not real Chinese food." She says, "I like the fact that they're friends with kids of many nationalities, don't have stereotypes. They're learning there are more ways to do things and to try to understand why do people do things differently. They've learned compassion, that they're truly blessed." And that kind of takes us into the next point that Mari's going to talk about, the idea of lots of different ways to do this.
Yeah, definitely, even as adults, if we haven't developed this, we quickly are thrown into problem solving and flexibility. When we have teams come over and we lead a group of, whether it's youth or men or women, adult men and women, we talk to them. The first thing we talk to them about is flexibility. Things are so different outside of your own culture that you just need flexibility, and our kids are being raised in this, knowing that when we go to the post office to pick up a Christmas package that they have been waiting for from grandma for so long, that I might not come home with that that day because they decided to close the post office at noon and didn't tell anybody after you've been waiting for 4 hours. As you can tell, I'm not frustrated with that.
So we need some healing.
I need to figure out, how do I make the most of this situation? And like I said, with my 4-year-old at the playground, it was, how am I going to make the most of this? And that is something that we constantly need to learn, even as adults. How are we going to make the most? And we have some friends who shared their perspective from, she actually has lived in different parts of the world, in Asia and now here, and what she shares is that I love that TCKs have the perspective of a world that takes them further than just the neighborhood around them. They have learned that there are more ways to doing something than just the American way, and that is so huge. Like I said, we lead mission teams all the time, and that is, and here we have adults who are just
They struggle with that concept
right,
a lot.
because they're just, it's the first time in 40 years that they have had to face it. There's another way.
They just
to
don't
do
have the
it.
contrast. It's like the fish in the water doesn't know it's in the water until it's out. It's the same thing. Like,
Yeah.
what? There's another way of doing this?
So maybe I've been learning this too. They have learned to adapt to change because it happens so often, and I hope that will help them be more independent and stronger and later in life. So yeah, definitely that is in you every day when we go out, just everyday life, and you see the construction workers, and they make up a pulley system that's very different from the States of how to get bricks to the top of the 5th floor. And it's like seeing all these things, that there is more than one way to do it. Another mom shares, and she says, there it is. They have also seen, no, that's not it.
Just exposed to different languages, cultures.
Right. They have been exposed to different languages, cultures, food, and different ways of thinking and doing things, which again, those are the kind of stuff that fosters the creativity, flexibility, and problem solving that helps them at their age, but even further on beyond the future, in college, in their jobs, when they are working with others outside of their own culture, wherever they may be. So yeah, it's been that's definitely been a fun thing to watch in my kids.
Yeah, I think that creativity extends into family and friendships, how those bonds are shaped, and that's another of the real blessings that we see, is that our kids have a whole lot of opportunity to grow in friendships and to make good bonds and to really value friendships when they have people coming in and out of their lives a lot. Not all expat living situations are full of transition, but I think a lot of them are. If you're connected with other foreigners living abroad, people come and go all the time and are very mobile, and so the kids they realize they realize how you don't necessarily know that you'll have a friendship, that person with you forever. And so I think that gives them a deep appreciation, ideally, for living in the moment, valuing those friendships. And I also think that it gives a great appreciation for a family. And not that our kids don't fight all the time, because mine certainly have a lot of their. So with having people come in and out of their lives a lot, third culture kids learn that it's important to affirm relationships and to be able to say goodbye in a healthy way. If you're with parental guidance, you can show them it's important to tell someone what you appreciate about them and to not just try to hide from the goodbye.
Our fourth point, our kids develop a heart for serving, giving, and just empathy to see the needs around them. It's really, since the first day, full day that we were here, we had walked out to the street from where we were living, and it was shocking for me to see how many little 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds were just out on the street selling candy. They weren't begging, but they were selling candy, and I couldn't, it was too much for me to grasp and handle. And I remember immediately my 4-year-old asked, it's like, why aren't they with their moms? And I, that was something we'd never been exposed to in the U.S. And you do see homeless people begging. As a result of that, we were able to figure out, God just put on my heart, what can I do as a family, what can we do as a family to help our kids see that they can be a change, even if it was just giving a lunch to one kid, that they can be serve here in this community where God brought us. And it's not just us serving God here in South America, but them too. So we started what we call Operation Brown Bag, and basically it's giving lunches to kids. Kids from the U.S. send the bags and put money in it, and then we buy the lunches and we fill them up and we go out as a family. So that's happened since the beginning 8 years ago, and now we still do it, but not as often, and now we do it differently. So those have been really neat opportunities, and I love that we've been able to, as a result of living and seeing the poverty, that we've been able to instill the value of kindness and serving in our kids. It was really sweet just this past weekend, my preschooler, just out of nowhere, he was playing, and then he comes over to me and he says, Mommy, we should make pizzas and then go give them out to the street kids. And it was just, we never had done that, but it was just sweet for me to think that he's come up with this idea on his own, whatever was going on in his mind. I have no idea what was going through, but he just popped over where I was working and he said, let's make pizzas and go give them to the street kids. So just that we are able to develop that empathy, and not just that, but that they know that they can be used at this age to help others, and that God can use them. And that's been really neat to see that for them to realize that the Holy Spirit can also work in them to help others and be a light and be a practical help to those in need. One of the things another mom said, and really that gives them a sense of that they have a purpose, which is huge for me as I'm as we are raising our boys, is to give them a sense of purpose and that there's something bigger than themselves, and they can be a avenue to make that change happen, even if it's small. This mom says she is also from South America, but she's traveled all over the world, and her thing she says is, our kids see the world through a different lens. They see the beauty in the hard things and have a passion to do something about the injustice in the world. And they understand that there's always more to the story than meets the eye. And that is so true, that there's always more to what meets the eye. I think seeing that there is a bigger picture, and we actually been in a lot of these homes of these kids who are out on the street, and they've seen that it's not just a kid who's trying to make extra money, because sometimes they do.
Yeah. And to wrap it up, I wanted to read, we have one more quote from a mom who's had her kids in Asia, and she's had her kids here in South America, and I love her perspective. She says, something that I'm glad to have learned and seen growing up as a TCK is how no matter where you are, selfishness in the end all looks the same, and it is always the cause of brokenness and pain. And in contrast, selfless love expressed through the power of the Holy Spirit is universally life transforming. No one culture or place is better than another. All are lacking without the love of Jesus breathed into them. She says, having the privilege of helping my girls learn to see and appreciate that fact, because they get to live and experience different cultures and places, is probably the thing I love most about raising TCKs. And I do think it's beautiful that our children get to see Jesus working around the world globally, intuitively from a young age. They see people gathering together to worship God, to serve God, to bless Him and His people, and they see that happening in different cultures and different languages. They know that that Christianity isn't something that just belongs to one nation or one language, but that our God is a God of diversity and a God who works among people in every culture. And it's that little, the thought comes to mind pretty regularly, especially when we're at church, that this is a little taste of heaven, that every tribe and tongue and nation, that we're getting to see pieces of that right now, and our kids are getting to see that from a young age, that shapes their understanding of the gospel. That's something that's a huge gift.
And that it doesn't just look one way, that you sit in the pews at church and you clap your hands, or sometimes you stand, but that people worship in so many different ways. And I had a friend in college, and he was raised with men and women without their shirts at the church service, and that was very different, and they worshiped very differently. They stood up and they jumped. So yeah, it's neat for them to see, like you were saying, that our God is a God of diversity. I hope that this encourages you, because I think a lot of times as moms, we in one way or another feel guilty because we're raising our kids in another country, away from family and whatnot.
There are challenges.
Right, yeah. Yes, be encouraged. We have so much to be thankful for, and as we raise our kids in another country. We'll see you again on our next chat on the challenges of raising kids in another country. Ciao.